Okay, today is going to be our fourth day of notes for our Ancient Greece unit. Today we're going to split up the notes into two parts. The first part will be the Golden Age of Athens, and we'll take a quick break and we will follow that up with the Peloponnesian War. Athens and Sparta led the Greek alliance to victory over the Persians in the Persian War. The Persians were driven out. Both Athens and Sparta claimed that they were the reason that the Greeks were victorious. Now, we know that last class, Athens went on to create the Delian League, which meant that they almost had an empire. They had a lot of power over the other Greek city-states. And Sparta, who had invested so much into the Persian Wars, came away almost empty-handed compared to Athens. So they were not happy. So we have a golden age in Athens, which lasts from 477 to 431 BCE. We've talked about another golden age before. That was in India, the golden age of the Gupta. And just like in India, Athens will have enormous growth in intellectual and artistic learning. We'll see them create new developments in sculpture, drama, so writing plays, philosophy, poetry, and architecture. Pericles was seen as the leader of Athens for around 32 years during this golden age. So sometimes the golden age of Athens is also called the golden age of Pericles. He has three goals. He wants to strengthen democracy. Remember, democracy is the government system where citizens have the power, and they have that power by voting. He wants to hold and strengthen this new Athenian empire, and he wants to glorify Athens, meaning that he wants Athens to be the greatest of all city-states in Greece. And he wants to make it beautiful. He wants to make it an attraction for all Greeks to come and see. So as we said in previous classes, Athens had a direct democracy. That means that citizens ruled directly. They did not vote representatives to do the work for them. Now in the United States today, we have a representative democracy, which we call a republic, and that was a Roman style of government. We'll get to that in our next unit. So in a direct democracy, citizens have an equal voice. Everyone is given one vote. It doesn't matter if you are rich or poor. So long as you are a citizen, you have equal power to someone else. So one way that Pericles would try to strengthen democracy was to pay public officials. They would be given salaries. And the thought was if public officials were receiving money from the government for their service, they would be less likely to take bribes. So it would cut down on corruption. Athens had more citizens participating in its government than any other city-state. By this point, a citizen was a male, 18 years old or older, and born of citizen parents. They actually dropped the property qualification, which allowed more people to participate in Athenian democracy. Laws were proposed and voted on by an assembly of all citizens. They would come together and meet at a set time. This is where they would choose a leader as well. The leader didn't make the decisions for Athens, but the leader was there to help run the day-to-day business of Athens, of the government. And the leader would help to run the assembly. And of course, we know that the leader for 32 years was Pericles. To strengthen the Athenian Empire, Pericles used the Delian League. Many Greek city-states were part of this Delian League. It was a strategic alliance in case the Persians ever came back. And Delian League members would have to pay a tax. But Athens took the money from the League's treasury and used it to strengthen their navy. And some city-states would go on to resent Athens, which of course included Sparta. And that's going to cause problems later on. Athens would build the greatest navy in the Mediterranean using that Delian League money. They gained access to surrounding waterways, and they would control any waterway that connected two other bodies of water. You would have to pay taxes to Athens to use them. They needed to have strong overseas trade to bring in raw materials as well as grain to feed the people. Cities in the Peloponnesus, which was that peninsula, that little offshoot from the rest of Greece, would resist and form their own alliance, the Peloponnesian League, which would be led by Sparta. To glorify Athens, Pericles took money from the Delian League's treasury and used it to rebuild Athens. Remember, Athens was burnt to the ground by the Persians. But he didn't use any simple materials to rebuild Athens. He used expensive materials like marble, gold, and ivory. He then brought in the greatest Greek artists and architects to create sculptures and buildings to glorify Athens. Okay, he made Athens the crown jewel of all the Greek city-states. It's around this time where classical art is coming into formation. Classical art focuses on ideal beauty, not realism. So what they're looking for is the perfect form. They want their statues to look strong and graceful. Their statues will not show any emotion, only serenity. Serenity means peacefulness and tranquility. So we can see classical art featured in this statue called the discus thrower. And when we look at this, this is supposed to show the perfect form. This is what Greeks thought the perfect man would look like. And notice his face, even though he's throwing this discus, he has a very peaceful expression. Normally when you're trying to do something physical like throwing a disc or playing a sport, your face is scrunched up and looking intense. Well, in this statue, his face shows no emotion. So here we have Athens. What do we call this formation where the temples are built on? Go ahead and answer that in the chat. And that is, of course, the Acropolis. So this is the Parthenon. This was the temple to Athena built on the Acropolis. And you would find it in Athens. This is a recreation of the Parthenon and what you would find inside. We've got our statue of Athena that was created by the sculptor Phidias. We'll talk more about him next class or in a few classes. And it was said to be a 30-foot tall ivory and gold statue, but we don't have the real thing anymore. And of course, the Parthenon was built out of marble. We need to know the three types of Greek columns. The first is the Doric column. It's very plain. And when we look at it, we are just focused on what we call the capital, the top of it that connects to the roof of the building. Okay, so the Doric is very simple or plain. We would say that any dork can draw a Doric column. So here are some examples of Doric columns. And again, they just look like rectangles that hold up the roof. Next up is the Ionic column, and it has those swirl patterns right here. So the way I remember the Ionic column is it looks like a set of eyes. Okay, and think about watching a cartoon like Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote or Tasmanian Devil, and you know when they get bonked in the head, what happens to their eyes? Their eyes kind of swirl like that too. Okay, so that's how I remember the Ionic column. Here we have many examples of Ionic columns. They all look like these swirling eyes. Finally, we have the Corinthian column. The Corinthian will be used by the Romans as well, but for me, I remember the Corinthian column because it is complex and complicated. I'll start with the letter C. And it has these flowery, leafy patterns that shows how complicated it actually is to create. So we have many examples of Corinthian columns. Once again, we've got the Acropolis with the Parthenon situated on top in the city-state of Athens. This is what we think it would have looked like during the Golden Age of Athens. It's a model of the city. And we can see other buildings and temples that stood along with the Parthenon. We can see these three types of columns used in the United States even today. Here we have the Lincoln Memorial. And what type of columns do we see? We'll go ahead and put up a poll and you can answer it in the poll. What types of columns are those? And yes, those are Ionic columns. Here at the Supreme Court, we also have columns. What type of columns are these? Once again, we've got the poll question, so just go ahead and change your answer if you need to put the correct one. And those are Corinthian columns. We've got a few on this page. Once again, use the poll. But here at the university, which will not be named, located in Charlottesville, what type of columns are they using there? And those are Ionic, good. At the New York Customs House, what type of columns? And those are Doric columns. Finally, the Russell House in Connecticut, what type of columns? And those are Corinthian columns. What type of columns do we have here? Once again, Corinthian columns. And the last column you guys have to look at today, what type of column is this? And it's a Doric column.